On August 19, 1981, two American F-14 Tomcats were flying a routine patrol over the Gulf of Sidra, off the coast of Libya, international waters that Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi had unilaterally claimed as his own territory. Two Libyan fighter jets, Su-22 fitters, approached the American aircraft and fired first. The missile missed. What happened in the next few seconds became one of the most one-sided air engagements of the entire Cold War. The F-14 crews reacted, maneuvered, and fired. Both Libyan aircraft were destroyed. Both American aircraft returned safely to their carrier without a scratch. It was the first real combat test of an aircraft that had, until that moment, been known mostly for its role defending Navy carrier battle groups against a Soviet bomber threat that never actually arrived. 15 years later, Hollywood would make this aircraft one of the most recognizable fighter jets in the world. But the real story of the F-14 Tomcat started long before Top Gun, and it's considerably more interesting than the movie.
Another world, sky.
The F-14 story begins with a failure. In the 1960s, the U.S. military attempted an ambitious experiment: build a single fighter jet, the F-111B, that could serve both the Air Force and the Navy. The idea was efficiency: one airframe, two branches, lower costs. It didn't work. The F-111B was too heavy, too underpowered for carrier operations, and too compromised by trying to satisfy two very different missions at once. The Navy canceled its participation in 1968, but the Navy still had a real problem to solve. Soviet naval doctrine in the Cold War relied heavily on long-range bombers carrying anti-ship cruise missiles, designed to overwhelm American carrier defenses with sheer numbers of incoming threats fired from well outside a carrier's normal defensive range. The Navy needed a fighter that could patrol far ahead of the fleet, detect threats at extreme range, and eliminate them before they got close enough to launch their missiles. Grumman Aerospace won the contract in 1969 to build exactly that aircraft. The result was the F-14 Tomcat, named partly in honor of Admiral Thomas Connolly, a naval aviator who had fought for the Navy's independent fighter program, and partly to fit the Navy's tradition of feline fighter names, following the Wildcat, Hellcat, and Tiger Cat of earlier generations. Its most distinctive feature was its variable sweep wing, wings that could pivot forward for lift during takeoff and landing, then sweep back for speed and stability during high-speed intercepts. It was one of the most complex and visually striking design solutions in aviation history. The F-14 first flew in December 1970. It entered fleet service in 1974. For the next 15 years, its primary mission was one the public rarely saw: standing watch over Navy carrier battle groups, ready to intercept Soviet bombers that, thankfully, never came in anger. Flying the F-14 meant more than mastering a complex aircraft. It meant mastering one of the most demanding environments in all of military aviation: the deck of an aircraft carrier. Landing an F-14 on a carrier, what naval aviators simply call the boat, required hitting a moving target roughly the size of a small parking lot, at night, in bad weather, after hours of flying, with a margin for error measured in feet. The aircraft's tailhook had to catch one of 4 arresting wires stretched across the deck, decelerating the jet from over 150 miles per hour to a complete stop in about 2 seconds. Miss all 4 wires, and the pilot had to immediately apply full power and go around for another attempt, a maneuver naval aviators call a bolter. Every F-14 carried 2 crew members, a pilot up front and a radar intercept officer in the back seat, the RIO. Unlike a traditional weapons officer, the RIO in an F-14 managed one of the most sophisticated radar and missile systems of the era, tracking multiple targets simultaneously and guiding the long-range Phoenix missile to targets the pilot couldn't even see with the naked eye. The partnership between pilot and RIO was, by every account from those who flew it, closer to a marriage than a working relationship. crews trained together for years, developed shorthand communication under extreme stress, and trusted each other with decisions made in fractions of a second at supersonic speed. Life aboard a carrier deployed for 6 months at a time was its own kind of endurance test. Cramped quarters, unpredictable schedules built around flight operations rather than the clock, and the constant low hum of danger that came from operating high-performance jet aircraft in one of the most hazardous work environments in the American military. Naval aviators who flew the F-14 often describe it, even decades later, as the aircraft they loved the most and feared the most in equal measure. Before we continue, let's take a closer look at the aircraft at the center of this story. The Grumman F-14 Tomcat, the U.S. Navy's premier fleet defense fighter for over 3 decades. Role: carrier-based air superiority fighter and fleet interceptor, built to defend the fleet against long-range bomber and missile threats. Wingspan: 64 feet swept forward, 38 feet fully swept back. A variable sweep wing, one of the only fighters in history able to change its wing shape in flight to optimize performance at any speed. Crew: 2. A pilot up front and a radar intercept officer, the RIO, managing the aircraft's radar and weapons systems from the back seat. Engines: 2, generating a top speed of Mach 2.34, more than twice the speed of sound. Armament: an internal M61 Vulcan cannon, plus a mix of Sparrow, Sidewinder, and a long-range M54 Phoenix missile, capable of striking targets more than 100 miles away. In service with the U.S. Navy from 1974 to 2006. 32 years of carrier operations, Cold War patrols, and combat missions around the world. Now, let's get back to our story. For most of its early service life, the F-14's job was deterrence. A threat so effective that the war it was designed to fight simply never happened. But starting in the 1980s, the Tomcat found itself in actual combat, in circumstances its original designers had never fully anticipated. The Gulf of Sidra incident in 1981 was the first proof that the aircraft worked exactly as intended in real combat conditions. A second, nearly identical engagement occurred in 1989 when F-14s again shot down 2 Libyan MiG-23s under similar circumstances. By the 1991 Gulf War, F-14s flew combat air patrol and escort missions over Iraq, protecting strike packages from Iraqi fighters, though the anticipated large-scale dogfights with the Iraqi Air Force largely failed to materialize as Iraqi pilots avoided direct confrontation. Perhaps the most significant transformation came in the 1990s, when the Navy faced a difficult budget reality. Dedicated strike aircraft were being retired faster than replacements could be built. The solution was to convert the F-14, originally designed purely as an interceptor, into a precision strike aircraft as well. Fitted with the Lantern targeting pod system, the F-14 gained the ability to deliver laser-guided bombs with precision accuracy. Aviators began calling the modified aircraft the Tomcat, a fighter interceptor that had become one of the Navy's most capable strike platforms almost by necessity. F-14 Tomcats flew missions over Bosnia in the 1990s, over Afghanistan beginning in 2001, and over Iraq again in 2003. A fighter designed in the depths of the Cold War, adapting to conflicts its original engineers could never have imagined, more than 3 decades after its first flight. Through it all, the F-14 remained one of the most complex, most expensive, and most demanding aircraft to maintain in the entire Navy inventory. Its sophisticated systems, while revolutionary in the 1970s, became increasingly costly to keep operational as the airframes aged. In 1986, the film Top Gun made the F-14 Tomcat one of the most recognizable aircraft on the planet. The movie was, by most accounts from actual naval aviators, wildly exaggerated in its portrayal of fighter combat, but its impact was undeniable. Navy recruitment offices reported measurable increases in applications after the film's release. An entire generation of Americans who had never set foot on an aircraft carrier came to associate naval aviation almost entirely with the sight of an F-14 Tomcat streaking across the screen. By the early 2000s, the aircraft the Navy had relied on for nearly 3 decades was reaching the end of its service life. The newer F-14 Super Hornet offered lower maintenance costs, better reliability, and a versatility the aging Tomcat design could no longer match economically. The U.S. Navy retired its last F-14 squadron in 2006. The final operational flight took place aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, closing a chapter that had begun with a failed joint fighter program and ended with one of the most beloved aircraft in naval aviation history. But the F-14 story doesn't quite end there. Before the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the United States sold F-14 Tomcats to Iran, the aircraft's only foreign customer. When diplomatic relations collapsed, those aircraft remained in Iranian hands, cut off from American parts, support, and upgrades. Remarkably, decades later, a small number of Iranian F-14s reportedly remain in limited service today, kept flying through resourceful maintenance and improvisation, making Iran the only country in the world still operating the aircraft the U.S. Navy retired nearly 2 decades ago. It is one of the stranger footnotes in modern aviation history, an American Cold War fighter born to face down Soviet bombers, ending its operational life not in American hands, but in the hands of the very kind of adversary it was never designed to serve. The F-14 Tomcat was built to solve a problem that, in the end, never fully materialized: a mass Soviet bomber assault on American carrier battle groups that the Cold War's uneasy balance of power ultimately prevented. But in the decades it served, it found real missions anyway. It shot down enemy fighters over the Mediterranean. It evolved from pure interceptor to precision bomber. It defended carriers, escorted strike packages, and became, almost by accident, one of the most culturally significant aircraft ever built, thanks to a movie its own designers never could have anticipated. 32 years of Navy service. A design so distinctive that its swing-wing silhouette remains instantly recognizable, even to people who have never set foot near a military base. The F-14 Tomcat proved that sometimes the aircraft built for a war that never comes ends up maturing anyway, for reasons nobody could have predicted when the first prototype rolled out of the hangar in 1970. If you'd like to support this project, the link is in the description below. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one. We'll see you on the next flight.